Hey everybody, Arnaldo here, broadcasting from Fidelius Frequency. Welcome to my channel, and welcome to the third episode of my little mini-series on the Smiths, The Sun Shines Out of Our Behinds. Long overdue third episode. And initially I had planned a totally different topic for the third episode and had to switch it around because today, in this video, we are celebrating the 40th anniversary of This Charming Man. So let's dig into This Charming Man right after the intro. This Charming Man is the second single released by the Smiths. It was released on October 28th, 1983, and at the time it only peaked at number 25 on the UK chart. It was subsequently re-released in 1992 in occasion of the release of a compilation of a best of on various formats as well, I believe also on CD single, and at that time it peaked at number 8 on the UK charts. So that represents the highest charting position for a Smiths single. Like I said, it was the second single, but it was not intended to be the second single because they originally had earmarked Reel Around the Fountain, which is a song that appears on the Smiths' debut album, as the second single. But Jeff Travis, the head of the label, thought that maybe the lyrical content of Reel Around the Fountain would have been criticized. We won't get into that at this time. Maybe that'll be a topic for a future video when we talk about the Smiths' debut album, and was hesitant maybe to release Reel Around the Fountain until he heard This Charming Man. Now let's talk a little bit about the origin of This Charming Man. Johnny Marr and Morrissey had already composed the bulk of the songs that were to form the Smiths' debut album. And as a matter of fact, they had already started recording unsuccessfully some sessions with Troy Tate for the album. And they were booked to perform on the John Peel show. And in occasion of that, Johnny Marr wanted to debut a new song. Inspired by label mate Roddy Frame of Aztec Camera, who was having quite a bit of success with a song from this album called Walk Out to Winter. It's a very refreshing, upbeat, cheery song. He thought that all of the material that they had composed up until then was a bit melancholy, maybe a little harsh, and he wanted to write something, or a melody or a riff, that was upbeat and cheerful. Hence why the riff on This Charming Man. Gave it to Morrissey, who wrote the lyrics, and they started recording it during the John Peel session, and Jeff Travis, the label head, the head of Rough Trade, thought that it would have been the perfect single. Very interesting that while at the BBC, producing the tracks that they were laying down for the BBC, was John Porter, who they immediately clicked with and decided that he would be a good fit to produce the single, and then afterwards also the album, the debut album. John Porter was briefly a member of Roxy Music, and he also produced some of Bryan Ferry's solo albums. So the first actual recording of This Charming Man is not the version that we hear on the single, but actually the version that was included on Hatful of Hollow, which is one of the John Peel sessions. The Smiths later recorded the song in London, but were dissatisfied with the mix and the results of that session. It seemed a bit on the soft side. They wanted a punchier and edgier sound, and decided to re-record in Manchester at Strawberry Studios, and that is the version that was used on the single. Now let's talk a little bit about music. Johnny Marr, like I said, wanted to write something a little bit more cheerful, but he also wanted it to sound like an old school rock and roll song, where after the first bars, the music cuts off or interrupts or pauses for a minute, and the vocal line enters in, showcasing the main vocalist. And that's exactly what this charming man does, basically. He was also motivated or pushed by producer John Porter to elaborate a bit more on the guitar sound. As a matter of fact, it contains quite a few overdubs of different layers of guitars, which is actually quite invigorating for Johnny Marr. He enjoyed that. And now let's talk a little bit about the lyrical content of this charming man. Morrissey has said that he set out to write lyrics that would stand out against modern day pop songs of the time. And he wanted to use words that were less commonly used, not only in English conversational language, but in pop songs. And let's say he succeeds in that, not only in this charming man, but throughout all of the lyrics of his career. And starting from the opening line, where instead of using the commonly used phrase as a flat tire, he opts instead for a punctured bicycle, which is supposed to describe the stranded bicyclist on a English countryside, who then gets rescued by a charming man in a charming car, who then proceeds to flirt with the bicyclist, who kind of remains shy and very awkward. So we don't really have a resolution to the story, probably because Morrissey conceived these lyrics as one-liners that were stitched together, woven together to form a very loose storyline. One of these one-liners is very autobiographical, and it is my favorite line of the song. I would go out tonight, but I haven't got a stitch to wear, clearly alluding to Morrissey's financial situation of still living at home with his parents and not having enough money to afford nice clothes. One more thing to point out is the bicyclist is referred to as a jumped up pantry boy. That is clearly taken from the 1972 film adaptation of a homoerotic play by Anthony Schaefer called Sleuth. I kind of think that sums it up for the lyrics of this charming man. Now let's talk a little bit about the B-sides. The Smiths, as usual, always offered a plethora of B-sides, which were never included on official albums, but later got compiled in other standalone collections. So this charming man originally first came out only on 7-inch, and it had the backing track as Jean. Jean is somewhat an autobiographical song. Probably refers back to a time when Morrissey and his best friend Linda Sterling were living in a rented room, also kind of penniless, and describes the hard life of a working class couple, probably. And also, this one has lyrics that were inspired by one of Morrissey's favorite playwrights, Sheila Delaney. And talk a little bit about the music of Jean. It remains one of my many favorite B-sides from the Smiths. Originally, it was very hard to find. It was only on the 7-inch. Later, the Smiths issued a 12-inch of this charming man, which you see here, and in very other versions behind me, with or without the name of the band on it, and with different track listings. But none of them included the B-side, which was Jean, unique to this 7-inch single. Was never included on any of the other collections. And it only became available on CD when it was released in 2008 on the Sound of the Smiths compilation. So the music of Jean started off, Johnny Marr says, as having more of a Drifters kind of feel, where then Morrissey actually asked him to speed it up a bit. So that's how we get the tone of Jean, which is still very melancholic and sad, but kind of like a rough guitar dirge. Subsequently, this charming man was also released on a 12-inch single featuring 2 additional B-sides. The first one is Accept Yourself. That song is also featured in a different version. I believe it's the BBC version on Hatful of Hollow, and it was also attempted during the aborted Troy Tate sessions for the debut album. But here it's featured in a version produced by John Porter, like the other songs on the 12-inch. And musically, it was inspired by almost a Motown or Four Tops kind of song. And lyrically, it is probably one of the most positive lyrics Morrissey's ever written, addressed to his fans, reminding them to believe in themselves and to have a positive outlook on life in order to achieve the things that they most want or that they most desire in life. Then we have Wonderful Woman, which is totally opposite atmosphere from Accept Yourself. We go from an upbeat Motown almost kind of cheerful song to a very atmospheric, solemn song, which did not start off like that. It was actually supposed to be more of a tongue-in-cheek song where the Wonderful Woman supposedly was inspired by Morrissey's best friend, Linda Sterling, kind of describing this woman, which is not very nice. Turned out with a very almost ghostly vocal by Morrissey and a lot of layered guitar work, almost haunting and very atmospheric. So two definitely very different songs on the B-side. And lastly, let's talk about the artwork of this charming man. As I've said in other videos, Morrissey gave great attention to all of the 7-inch singles, 12-inch singles, album, and CD artwork of all the Smiths' official releases. And on this charming man, we have Jean Marais, who is the cover star. It is a still taken from the Jean Cocteau movie Orpheus. We have him in the front as well as in the back with his hand. The back also features the lyrics, which on the first pressing have an incorrect lyric. Why pander life's complexities was later corrected on subsequent issues with the correct lyric, why pamper life's complexities. The run-out groove. Morrissey typically also always had a message in the run-out groove, and in this case, we have two different messages. The single has Slap Me on the Patio as the run-out groove message, and it's hinting at what was supposed to be the second single, which I spoke about earlier, Reel Around the Fountain, and that is a lyric from Reel Around the Fountain inscribed in the run-out groove of the 7-inch single. Whereas the 12-inch has a quote or a lyric from the song This Charming Man, and specifically it has, will nature make a man of me yet? And one final thing. There are so many versions of This Charming Man. There is the versions I spoke about, the one recorded in London, the Manchester version, the John Peel session version. In addition to that, there is a New York remix done by Francis Kevorkian. And the instrumental version of that Francis Kevorkian, there is an original single mix, and then the single remix. I think they're all included on the reissue of 1992, whether it was the CD singles you see here above me or on the 12-inch over there, that has all of the different versions of This Charming Man, along with the two B-sides of the 12-inch single. However, Jane, as I mentioned earlier, the 7-inch single B-side, which actually I have to correct myself. I said originally was included for the first time on CD format on The Sound of the Smiths. Yes and no. The first time it was included on a CD compilation. However, its first appearance in the CD format was the B-side to one of the singles reissued in 1992. I guess that wraps it up for the third episode of The Sun Shines Out of Our Behind. I hope you enjoyed our in-depth look into This Charming Man. I will see you on the next episode of The Sun Shines Out of Our Behinds, or if you watch my channel, on the next video that will shortly be prepared. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.